Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Uh, my name is Tommy Marks. I'm the Vice President of Council Engagement for the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council. And it is my pleasure on behalf of our President and CEO, Sharon R. Pender, uh, who's unable to be with us here today, that I welcome you to the second series that we're putting on or inside emerging markets. The first one we have begun as a five-part with artificial intelligence. And this one is focused on cybersecurity maturity model certification that Mr. William McBorough, who I'll introduce momentarily, will share with us. And it's a three-part series beginning today that will take place, that William will provide his expertise to us. Some upcoming things you can see on September 17th, we have a save the date for you with our annual golf tournament, a business and networking event. Come out and join us. And then the day on the Hill, that's when our president, along with other presidents in the ecosystem of the National Minority Supply Development Council, go to Capitol Hill and engage with legislators and their staff. And then we have our annual business meeting at the end of the year. But you can see we've got two sessions left on AI, training series, July the 16th. Registration is open for all of our webinars that you see listed there, along with AI. We'll close out the last one, August the 20th. And William will be back after the day on July the 23rd with his second in his series, CMMC, and finish up in August. We're able to do this based on a grant that we were able to secure through the Small Business Administration, based on some congressional earmarks that funded this grant on emerging markets. And areas we tend to look at with this was how things is changing in the energy market, also in the AI and then cybersecurity. And our focus has been on those two, AI and cybersecurity. And so today it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. William McBorough. And I'm not going to eulogize him, but you got to know who's talking to you and take the talent that we bring to the table. And so William is an accomplished cybersecurity and risk management executive, an educator and entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience in designing, implementing, and leading strategic information security programs across the government and private sector. As the Chief Information Security Officer and lead CMMC assessor at MCGlobalTech, which is a certified minority business enterprise with the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council. He specializes in building CMMC-aligned cybersecurity compliance programs and has been guiding defense industrial-based companies in achieving and sustaining the cyber compliance since 2017. In addition, Mr. McBorough is the Chief Information Security Officer at cybercomply.us, an AI-powered platform helping defense contractors achieve and maintain compliance with the cybersecurity maturity model certification. As a recognized leader in information assurance and regulatory compliance, Mr. McBorough has advised federal, state, and local government agencies on cybersecurity engineering, infrastructure protection, and risk management. His work has supported the secure transformation of national systems through alignment with NIST, CMMC, HIPAA, the ISO, and PCI DSS frameworks. He's an active educator with over 16 years. He has served as an adjunct associate professor of cybersecurity at University of Maryland Global Campus, Southern New Hampshire University, and the Washington University of Science and Technology. His previous academic roles include faculty appointments at George Mason University, Northern Virginia Community College, and the EC Council University, where he has trained future cybersecurity professionals and leaders. He holds a Master's of Science in Information Security and Assurance and a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Engineering from George Mason University. He maintains multiple professional certifications including a certified information systems security professional, certified in risk and information security controls, certified information security auditor, certified CMMC professional, and a lead certified CMMC auditor. It is my pleasure to present Mr. William J. McBurrows.
Tommy, thanks for that lengthy introduction. I promise for the next session, I will I will give you a shorter version.
They have to know who's coming.
Well, I'm here. I'm here.
Take it away.
It's my pleasure to be here today, and to share some of the work that I do with not just the council, but with my fellow MBEs. I can't say enough for the value that CRMSDC has provided to myself and to my company. Being a certified MBE has opened a lot of doors for us, and I certainly I take great pleasure in being able to partner with you all, and share some of this information with our fellow MBEs. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen here momentarily. Okay. Hope you all can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So today we're going to talk about CMMC, but we're not going to talk about cybersecurity. And the reason we're not going to talk about cybersecurity is the cybersecurity maturity model certification is a framework that the Department of Defense, now Department of War, have in place to protect its information and its systems primarily from foreign adversaries. What that means to us MBEs, as this is a business requirement for selling products and services to the Defense Department. Okay, so I have a lot of conversations about cybersecurity, but today I want to have a business conversation, as a fellow MBE, a business owner, to my fellow MBEs to talk about what CMMC means for you as a business. So today we're going to talk about the CMMC foundations. We're going to talk about how to strategize around how you implement a CMMC program to manage controlled unclassified information, and how you can scope your program in a way that makes sense for your organization. So Tommy did mention this, but again, I am with MCGlobalTech. We are a cyber risk management firm based in DC here. And we are being hosted today by the CRMSDC. And this program is funded in part by a grant from the SBA. And we certainly appreciate their support to us MBEs. Tommy has overindulged me in reading, a lengthy bio here, but just a little bit about my background. I've been doing this work for close to 25 years. We've been focused on supporting defense contractors for the last decade. And CMMC as a program is based on a set of security requirements that have been on the books for over a decade. And we've been very much immersed in this space. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about a few things today. A brief slide here. You all are going to receive this slide as a handout. So I'm not going to bore you on what we do as a company. My website link is on the slide. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about today. So why does this training matter to you? CRMSDC members are constantly pursuing growth opportunities in the federal space. CMMC as a program is a Defense Department initiative, which we fully expect to extend to other civilian agencies in the coming years. So if you're an MBE that is in the federal space, this matters to you. It matters for you to be aware, It matters for you to prepare. It matters for you to start to make business decisions, how you position your company to be able to continue to do business with the federal government. Whether you're in defense contracting, you're in high technology spaces like AI, and sort of, information technology, information management, whether you are anywhere in the federal supply chain, the firms that we work with, doing this work spans from high tech, technology vendors to manufacturing firms, to engineering firms, to construction firms, to medical research firms, to professional service firms, staffing firms. There's a far-reaching consequence for the government now taking a more intentional approach to ensuring that these protections are in place. Uh, this is not a cybersecurity issue, right? This is a business eligibility issue. Am I going to be eligible to continue to or to begin to provide products and services to the federal government, right? This is what we are talking about today. We're not talking about hackers and attackers and so on and so forth. It's about, am I going to continue to be able to provide these services to the government? My company, MCGlobalTech, we are a government contractor. We have a GSS schedule. We are facility cleared. We provide services to both federal and state, government entities. These requirements apply to us, right? So all the things that I'm going to be talking about today are considerations that we not only help our clients with, but this is our reality on a day-to-day basis. Now, you have to understand why this matters and why CMMC as a program exists today, right? This information was designed to protect sensitive information, to protect the defense infrastructure of the U.S. against nation state actors, to protect intellectual property, to address weaknesses in the federal supply chain. The drivers of this program, a lot of folks are now discovering CMMC anew. CMMC as a program provides no new security requirements on the contract base, right? There are regulations that have been on the books. The DFARS Clause 7012 has been in the DFARS for close to a decade, over a decade now, right? These are requirements that have been on the books for a long time. The standard that CMMC requires you to implement is the NIST 800-171 standard. That is the federal government-wide standard for protecting the information that we're going to be talking about today. This is not just a DoD or DoW initiative, right? These requirements apply across the board to every MBE that is supporting a federal agency. Okay. The program, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, is just a validation program of requirements that the contract base has been attesting to for years, right? There's nothing new here. The government is just saying, show us that you are doing the things that you've been telling us year over year that you are continuing to do, right? It is a program to verify pre-existing security requirements. And in order for you to protect this information, you have to follow the flow of information. So there are contractual flow down clauses. That means that if you are a prime contract, that means you have an agreement with the government and you are flowing down information to a vendor or a subcontractor. These requirements flows down to your subcontractors as well. The protections follow the data. Now, there's a graphic here in the slide, and the graphic is of a puzzle, right? And this puzzle has one puzzle piece highlighted. Very often I speak with federal contractors that say, hey, the work that I do is not sensitive at all. We only do X. We can only create this specific deliverable. We only create this specific gadget. We only do this one thing. And there's nothing sensitive about the work that we do. You have to understand how the program is managing risk as a whole, right? So CMMC is managing risk not to you, risk to the government because information is being shared with you and with me. Okay, so your piece of the puzzle may be just a small piece, and that's the only part that you might have visibility into. However, you are part of a larger program. You're part of a larger system. You're part of a larger workflow that in order to protect that workflow system in its entirety, you have to ensure that the data that is flowing throughout that system is protected. So what that means is that if you are a small defense contractor and you have just a small piece of this puzzle, you have to implement the same security controls that folks that are operating larger pieces of the puzzle have to implement. Where by yourself, you might consider the work that you were doing not to be highly sensitive. However, you are part of a larger framework that all pieces of that data must be protected. So you might not have visibility into where your deliverables are going. You might not have visibility into where the gadgets you are producing are going. You might not have visibility into how the information that is being shared with you is part of a larger program, because that is not your role, that is not your contract, right? But you could be a sole proprietor working on one deliverable that is part of a system that has 1,000 deliverables, and you don't understand why do I have to implement all of these requirements? Is because the requirements follow the data, right? And in aggregate, that data must be protected for our national security. And that's the rationale that the government is employing when they are flowing down these requirements, with an acknowledgement that small businesses are going to struggle with this, right? They understand that we are going to struggle with this. Okay. So what's the information that I'm referring to? There are two classes of information here that are relevant. It's federal contract information, which are the basis for the CMMC level one. And this is information about contracts that about products and services that you are delivering to the government, right? Every government contractor receives federal contract information, right? That's what it means to be a federal contractor. So in essence, every federal contractor should be at a CMMC level one. These are requirements that are in the FAR that applies to every federal acquisition. Okay. There's a second class of information, the CUI, which is the controlled unclassified information. This is information that could include different classes of some is very technical, some is very operational information that requires a higher level of protection. You know, I have a firm that does construction. I have a client that does construction, right? The designs, the plans for government facilities is considered controlled unclassified information. We've worked with firms that are providing janitorial services. Now, in their mind, hey, we're only providing janitorial services, right? However, or in order to provide that services, you need building plans. And these building plans are plans of defense facilities, right? And that is important because that could be considered controlled unclassified information, right? Whereas federal contract information, which needs to be protected at the CMMC level one, um, pose its requirements from the FAR. The controlled unclassified information, which needs to be protected at CMMC level two, requires federal contractors to implement the NIST 800-1701 standard. And the NIST 800-1701 standard has 110 security requirements in them. But these 110 security requirements are broken up into 320 specific objectives that you have to meet. So when you're implementing a CMMC level two program, you rarely have 320 requirements that you have to meet. Some are technical, some are operational, some are documentation based. Right? But those are things that you should be mindful of. So who is impacted by this? Okay, organizations that have contracts with the government, prime contractors, all of their subcontractors, if they're flowing down this information in execution of these contracts, this could include technology service providers like your managed service providers, your IT MSPs. This could include staffing plans, manufacturing firms, engineering firms. It all depends on where the data is flowing. Before I proceed, there's one point here that I think is very important, and that point is CMMC certification is a contractual requirement. Right? It's not really about whether or not you possess CUI today. CMMC certification is certifying the information system that your organization is going to use in the event you do receive CUI in the future, right? So we talk to a lot of firms that say we don't really have an CUI. It doesn't matter, right? The government is certifying that in execution of your contract, if we were to provide you CUI, you have the ability to protect it. In order to do so, you have to demonstrate that ability to protect it before we give you the CUI, right? And that's a very important point. So the cybersecurity maturity model certification, CMMC, has really three levels, right? Level one, as we talk about, protects FCI. There's a basic set of security controls. All federal contractors need to be at this level. There are folks that are going to gain access to controlled, unclassified information, or I rephrase that could potentially gain access to controlled, unclassified information, need to be certified at a CMMC level 2. And then there are more advanced protections that are required for things like insider threat and against like nation state attacks for folks that are in highly sensitive defense programs that would need to be certified at a CMMC level 3. Okay. So what is the relationship, as I said, between CMMC as a program and NIST 800-171? The NIST 800-171 standard is the standard that has been on the books for over a decade for defense contractors to implement the 110 requirements that is broken up into 320 assessment objectives, right? Within this standard, there are 14 control families, or 14 control types of requirements, right? There are requirements around your IT infrastructure. There are requirements around your physical facilities. There are requirements around how you manage your staff, how you onboard staff, how you offboard staff. There are requirements around how you train your staff. And there's requirements around how you govern the system, the program that is going to protect controlled unclassified information in your environment. CMMC requires operational maturity, right? You have to be able to manage and run a CUI data governance program. This is not a non-trivial effort. It's not something that you just hire an IT firm to do, right? This requires governance, and governance is an actual discipline, right? So that's one thing that I think a lot of organizations take for granted. They believe they can just hire someone to come in and put some technology in place and give you some templates, but that does not constitute data governance. Some organizations are going to need CMMC level 2 third-party validation. We are in phase 1 of the CMMC rollout today. That started in November of last year, where firms are going to be are currently required to self-attest. Starting November of this year, the government is going to start to increasingly require third-party certification. That means you need an audit firm to come in and attest and verify that you are implementing your CMMC governance program in alignment with all 320 assessment objectives. So what does a CMMC program look like, right? CMMC is not an IT project. It's not a single project. It's a program that has a life cycle of its own. It's the gift that keeps on giving, right? So when we're implementing CMMC, we follow a full-phased approach. First, we have to strategize, right? How are we going to manage this data if we were to receive it? because it is that strategy that determines what is going to be the scope of our compliance, right? Once we determine that, then we go into phase two, which is the program implementation and operations. First, we have to implement all 320 requirements, and we have to operationalize them, right? If I'm coming in as a consultant and I'm giving you 500 pages of security policies, plans, standard operating procedures, etc., these are things that are sort of that are mandating you to perform certain actions. You have to operationalize your CMMC program, and that takes time to do. For a lot of the firms that we work with, this is really transforming how they operate. Okay. And after you operationalize your program, you go into phase three, which is audit readiness and assessment preparation. If you are destined for third party audit, you have to be able to verifiably demonstrate to the auditor that we are performing all of these actions. Hey, we train all of our employees. Here are the training records, right? Hey, we manage all of our systems. Here are the system management records. Right? We do X every week and Y every month. Here are the weekly records, and here are the monthly records to be able to demonstrate that you are performing these actions and have the evidence to back that up. Okay. And when and if you get through your audit, then you have to sustain that program. All the things that you committed to, you have to keep doing them. Right. And that is the life cycle of your CMMC program. CMMC requires annual attestations, right? That means every year you go back and you tell the government, I'm still doing the things. Okay. And if you require CMMC certification, it requires triannual certifications. That means every 3 years, an auditor comes in and says, show me. Okay. And that is important to note. So how do we create a CUI management strategy? Because that's what drives how you implement CMMC within your organization, right? There are critical questions that must be answered, right? Who handles CUI, right? Where is it stored, right? Who has access to it, right? What systems are used to process CUI? Which vendors are going to service a touch CUI on our systems? All of these things drive your strategy. It also ultimately drives cost. It drives how much evidence you have to provide, and it drives the complexity that you will encounter in having to demonstrate that to an auditor. For a lot of firms, I recognize that these are questions for the future, right? Not how we handle CUI today, is how would we handle CUI, right? If you do not receive CUI today as a defense contractor, but CMMC certification is necessary for you to be awarded work that you might receive CUI in the future, then your questions are, who will have to access, right? How will CUI be processed? Which systems will we have to store CUI on? These are questions that you have to think. So I often advise clients to move out of the mindset of, I don't have CUI today. That doesn't matter, right? You are being audited. You are being asked to demonstrate that where I to receive CUI in execution of this contract, I can secure it, I can protect it, I can govern it, right? And that governance program has to be in place before you receive CUI, not after. Okay. So how does scoping work? When we are scoping our CUI environment, we are looking at the entire enterprise and we're saying, okay, of all the people in your organization, who's going to need to access this, right? What systems are going to need to access this, right? What networks are going to be used to transmit this CUI, right? Are you leveraging systems that are in the cloud? Is that where you're going to store your CUI? Who manages these systems? Our goal is always to include, to minimize your compliance scope as much as possible. Because for most organizations, your CMMC scope doesn't have to be your entire organization, right? It could just be a small subset of the users that need to have access to this data. We have a client that is in medical research that for some reason the files they are getting are classified as CUI. They have only one CUI user. So there's only a single user that is within the scope of the CMMC program. right? We have a lot of other clients where the CMMC scope is 10% of the user population, 5% of the user population. So the goal is always to define the smallest appropriate scope. Of course, we have clients that are in manufacturing where CUI is everywhere and everybody is within scope. Okay. But at first, you have to understand your compliance scope because it is the scope of people, systems, networks, locations that CUI is impacted that determines what your compliance scope needs to be. There are different approaches to scoping your CMMC program. Okay, so when I say scope, it means determining what is within the boundary of your compliance program and what resides outside the boundary, right? We have clients that are, again, in engineering and manufacturing, right? Their scope is enterprise wide because they have CUI across all the environment. The nature of their work is working with CUI, right? In which case, all the systems are within scope, all the users are within scope, all the facilities are within scope. Okay. There are other approaches where if you have the ability to, you can segment CUI within your network, within your location. Okay. We're deploying a program for a client right now that has 6 facilities. Okay. But they've segmented the scope in such a way that only a small subset of each location is segmented off to be where CUI is processed. So all the locations, all the systems, all the networks, all the users don't have to be within an enterprise-wide scope, right? You might have the ability to even tighten your scope a little bit more by creating an enclave where all the CUI is managed and protected, and that is totally segmented from the rest of your organization. That enclave can be on your facility, on your local network, but it could also be entirely cloud-based. Now, there are specific requirements for storing CUI in the cloud, right? These systems have to be FedRAMP authorized or FedRAMP equivalent. These are like the classifications for validating that these cloud systems are secure enough to store and process federal data. But you could have your enclave on site. You can have your enclave totally in the cloud. Okay. One of the ways that we've approached this is that we've developed the CMMC Assured Enclave. And it is a fully managed compliance operations as a service model that is purely cloud-based. And part of our approach for doing that is to do what? Is to reduce the scope of CMMC compliance for our clients, to place them in an environment that is totally governed, right? We are handling all of the compliance, all the security, all of the IT, all of the operations. Okay. It has allowed them to continue to function and work and manage all of their existing network and systems outside of the CMMC compliance boundary. And this is a solution that we put in place specifically for small businesses that don't have the ability to build their own CMMC program. So there are different ways, going back to how you scope, that small businesses, small MBEs can manage CMMC compliance. And this is a diagram of how we've sort of managed the scoping problem. So for our CAE to CMMC Assured Enclave solution, we have a fully governed enclave solution that we provide to our clients that allows them to keep the entirety of their existing company outside the scope of their CMMC, right? So what does this mean? This means that we're not going in and trying to turn the company into a CMMC compliant company. Right? We're not trying to turn all of the users CMMC compliant, all of the systems and networks and processing. We are providing them fully managed CMMC compliance as a service. It is important when we start to talk about scope, right? How you scope your compliance and the impact of that scoping. But as I said, there are different approaches for how CMMC scoping is handled. But there are some common mistakes that are made when organizations start to think about how they manage the CMMC scope, right? First, you're not defining the boundaries of CUI. You have to be able to think through the flow of CUI, control unclassified information, in your organization. We're going to receive it by email. It's going to be on this computer. We're going to upload it to this cloud system, et cetera, et cetera. You have to define your boundary. 2, uncontrolled email and storage. Right? Very likely your existing email and file storage systems, especially if they're cloud-based, are not compliant with CMMC, right? Shadow IT users are performing BYOD. CUI is flowing outside of anything that is controlled, right? Inconsistent data handling, right? There's no standardized process for how CUI is received, how CUI is stored, how CUI is transmitted, how CUI is disposed of, right? Again, these are all things that determine where your CMMC system is going to reside, right? Defaulting to the enterprise scope, just thinking that, okay, I have to make my company CMMC compliant. If you have to do that, that's what you have to do. However, that is not entirely necessary, right? If you are able to isolate and segment your scope, you can keep most of your companies outside of your CMMC scope, right? Inaccurate asset inventory, not knowing which systems you have. That is a more common problem than you might think. Doing things like sharing credentials, right? Again, contrary to CMMC rules and unclear vendor responsibilities. Most MBEs that we work with, especially small MBEs and those that are relying on their, either an IT, an outsourced IT model, right? Be an MSP or a part-time IT person. There are CMMC requirements that flows down from you to these individuals. So it is important that you fully understand what your vendor responsibilities are. So we talked about the different approaches to scoping. That's important because that drives significant business impact. Licensing cost, right? CMMC requires technology. That technology comes at a cost. The more technology in, the more cost, right? Internal labor. Who's going to manage your CMMC program? How much of that work is done internally? How much of that work goes to consulting cost? Right? So when we come in and we're doing sort of a fully managed government environment, we're taking away a bulk of the consulting costs that I now have to work with you to create a custom system for you when on average, most SMBs in the defense contracting space do not require a custom program, right? Things like audit prep, things like how you prepare for your assessment, what evidence you have to gather. So making the right scoping decisions up front is what drives the business impact. Because you are preparing for, again, some type of validation. Depending on the nature of your contract, there are different types of validation you need to prepare for. We are in the CMMC level 1 phase. In this phase, companies are required to self-attest, to log into the SPURS system in PIEE and enter the CMMC compliant status. This is important because now a lot of us who have been operating in this space may have been used to going into SPURS and entering a score that may be good, may not be good, right? And entering poems for your gaps and saying that, hey, I'm not there yet, right? I've made this level of progress. I still have these gaps, and I'm going to remediate these gaps within this time frame. Those days are gone. As of February of 2026, you are required to go in and you are required to go in and enter your CMMC level 2 self-assessment. CMMC level 2 self-assessments does not allow non-compliant attestations. Right? You have to go in and attest to your compliance. Otherwise, the system is not going to allow that. For some of us, we require third-party certification where we have a C3PAO, which is an auditing firm, come in, perform an audit, and give us a certificate demonstrating our compliance, right? So after November of this year, the government is going to start requiring that of more of us, right? So that is a very important milestone. Now, for folks that are operating at the CMMC level 3 level, which is a very small subset of the DIB that are working on highly sensitive systems and contracts, they're going to require a CMMC level 3 audit that is performed not by industry, but performed by the government itself. Okay, so these are the types of CMMC assessments that you have to be mindful of. Again, for those of us that have been in this space for a while, a year ago, we could go into SPRS, the SPURS, and we could enter our score. And if we were not fully compliant, we could enter plans of action and milestones to say, hey, I have these gaps. I am going to remediate them in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, right? Those days are a thing of the past. right? Right now, within the system, POAMs are restricted to a maximum 22 one-point controls. So what that means is that there's a methodology for assigning points to each of the 110 controls based on risk. There are one-point controls, there are three-point controls, there are five-point controls, right? So three-point controls and five-point controls are higher risk requirements, okay? Higher risk controls. Today, you cannot enter a POAM for a three-pointer or a five-pointer, right? So that means there's only the low risk, a small number of the low risk controls that you might be able to enter a POAM for to say, I have not fully met this yet, but I will do so fully in 6 months, 180 days. Okay. All this slide means is that you have to be compliant. That is the requirement. That is the only standard that matters. Okay. So what does building a readiness roadmap look like for you? Okay. So first, determine whether you have federal contract information or control unclassified information involvement. Okay. What does involvement mean? Involvement doesn't mean whether or not you have this data. In fact, what involvement means here, it means that are you as a business going to be going after contracts with the federal government that will require this CMMC level 2 or CMMC level 1? Right? That means you're looking strategically and say, we do this type of work, and these type of work will require these types of certifications. Therefore, I will have some involvement with FCI or CUI, right? You can start by reviewing your existing contracts. Again, the clauses for implementing the controls for CUI have been on the books for 10 years. So if you have a contract today with the Defense Department, you can go in there right now and do a search to see if you have the DFAR 7012 clause that requires the implementation of the standard to protect CUI, right? And that will clearly tell you what your future is going to look like from a certification requirement. If you're a subcontractor, right, your prime contractor is supposed to be flowing down these requirements to you, right? So it is important that if they haven't done so, that's on them because they have the agreement with the government. But again, this language, these clauses should be in your contract, even if you are first tier sub, second tier sub, third tier sub. Okay. Um, Thirdly, you are establishing governance. And I think this is the most important part of this of the list. Assigning accountability for the compliance program and the ongoing oversight. Who is going to manage this? This is where it gets tricky, right? Because most small business defense contractors do not have a resource that is both dedicated to this function and have the expertise to perform this governance function, right? But that is very necessary. Who is going to govern your CMMC program? For a lot of small businesses, it's the owner, because by default, the owner is the decider of all things. But CMMC requires governance, and governance requires expertise. And then you are mapping out the CUI lifecycle, the things that we talked about for scoping, right? How are we going to receive this? Where's it going to be stored? Who's going to have access to it? And based on that, you are determining your compliance boundary. Okay. How can I scope my CMMC compliance to ensure that it is as small and as tight as I need it to be? And based on that, you're determining your implementation model, right? Am I using some cloud-based, fully governed enclave like the one MCGlobalTech provides? Or am I using one of the other ones that are out there? Or am I building it locally on my network, right? Or again, the implementation model comes after you've done all of these things before. A lot of times vendors or contractors need help with CMMC and they go to the market and the market is presenting them solutions that are available, but you don't know that that solution matches what your governance frameworks need to be, right? Or best matches your compliance boundary, or best matches the flow of CUI within your organization. So that should be a starting point for determining, hey, how am I going to manage this data? Okay. And then you conduct a gap assessment. Okay. Again, for a lot of us that have been in this space for a while, a lot of organizations start, like we get calls all the time and say, can you come in and do a gap assessment? And my question is, have you determined how you're going to manage CUI? If the answer is no, congratulations, I've just performed your gap assessment. Right? It is all a gap, right? So just coming in and looking at a checklist and saying, are you doing these things that is not appropriate for this program? Because when you're performing a gap assessment, that gap assessment should be against the specific controls relative to your implementation model within your compliance boundary as decided by the flow of CUI within your organization. Right? If that gap assessment is not assessing these things, it's a generic waste of your time and money. Okay. And based on your assessment, you are creating your system security plan and you are implementing that plan, right? So there is a roadmap here that makes sense that must be followed so that you are determining how am I going to manage this data? And I'm creating a program that meets the requirements of the CMMC that is going to help me operate in a way that is compliant. Okay. So for example, if you are a small firm, you could be a small engineering firm, you are asking, there are questions that you have to ask, like, hey, is my entire company going to be within scope? Does every employee need to have access to CUI? Right? Where am I going to store this CUI? Who should have access into it? What systems are involved? What vendors are involved? Right? With something like an enclave model support the work that I do. Again, I'm coming back to these scoping questions because these are the questions that are going to drive everything that you do. You need answers to these. Okay. We have firms that have contacted us and say, hey, your fully governed enclave solution sounds great. We want to use it. And then we walk through their actual CUI workflows and establish that no, this is not right for you because the nature of your work requires the data to flow in places that cannot be constrained, right? So you need a program that is going to follow the data. So it's never a matter of just purchasing a solution. The solution that you implement has to mirror how you're going to access and manage this data based on these questions. You all are going to have copies of this slide to keep track of these questions. So there are some executive considerations that you all have to make. Okay. CMMC certification is required to continue to bid and perform, DoD contracts, right? Is this a business that you want to continue to be in? I have actually been engaged with firms that say, I understand what is required. DoD is 5% of our business. And there's a limit to the hoops that we're going to jump through for that 5%, right? So they're making business decisions about whether or not this investment makes sense for them, right? Every defense contractor has to be able to make that business decision, right? It is going to change the game for how you present yourself to the market. Supply chain competitiveness is key. One of the things that we're seeing, especially for smaller providers, is that the larger primes are not waiting for the government to say, hey, you need CMMC certification. Every week, I see a large prime send out a letter to the entire supply chain and say, we expect you to be certified to continue to work with us. Right? So being competitive in the supply chain is very necessary from a risk management perspective. You're going to find that larger prime contractors are not waiting, right, for the program to mature. They're managing their risk and they're saying our suppliers need to get certified. Certification was intended to demonstrate trust, right, both to your prime contractors and to the government, right? Proper scoping helps you manage the cost for CMMC. I can tell you CMMC costs real money, right? How much money, right, depends on how you scope and plan and manage your program, but it's all real money, right? The whole idea of this program is to reduce risk. The government is mandating mature cybersecurity practices within its supply chain to reduce risk to the government, right? There are some things that you are going to be required to do as part of this standard that in reality provides you absolutely no value, right? However, the system was designed not to protect you, but to protect the government from the risk of data that is being shared with you. So there are some things as a CMMC compliant company, there are some things that we have to do that is taking us 10 steps that a year ago, 2 years ago, it would take us 2 steps, right? But now we have to eat our own dog food. So everybody's going through this exact same process. Uh, CMMC requires operational maturity. How are you going to maintain the CMMC program moving forward? CMMC is not a project. See, if you are working with a vendor to get you quote unquote CMMC compliant, and that vendor is walking away and leaving you with 500 pages of security documentation, are you equipped to do all the things that you've just promised the government that you were going to do? Right? False Claims Act persecutions are a real thing today. Every other day, you are reading about companies that are settling with the DOJ because they said they were compliant with CMMC and with NIST 800-171, and it turned out that they were not. Right? So these are all considerations that as business owners, we have to make about how we approach this because CMMC readiness really is a business strategy decision. It is not an IT project decision. Okay. So I'm going to walk through this brief summary and then we have a poll that we're going to share. And then we're going to talk about a few things. Okay. So what are some key takeaways here? CMMC affects a wide range of suppliers within the federal contract base. Prime contractors, subcontractors, manufacturers, staffing firm, professional service firms, etc., etc., etc. Okay, this casts a very wide shadow. You may not understand why you're caught up within the net because your piece of the puzzle might be small, but your small piece is part of a larger puzzle and it matters. Okay. CMMC, the flow of CUI within your organization drives your compliance obligations. Okay. So if I'm looking for future contract opportunities, I'm looking for sources sought, I'm looking for RFIs, I'm looking for RFPs, right? The requirements of these clauses within those contracts, that's what drive my CMMC requirements. Okay. Or if you're working with a prime contractor today, you should be asking them, hey, what are your expectations for your vendors for CMMC? Right? Scope drives the cost, the complexity, and the evidence burden of demonstrating your compliance. It all goes back to how are you going to scope your CMMC programs? As a small business, the first thing we want to do is to avoid overscoping. Right? Anyone that has access that do not need to be within the scope of our CMMC compliance, I do not want you in the scope of our CMMC compliance. Okay. As a CMMC compliant company, I have folks that are within scope that do work that are relevant to CMMC and have folks that are outside of scope, and we're doing different things for those people. Yeah. Governance must begin early. CMMC is not an IT project. It is a data governance program, right? Ownership for compliance, ensuring that you have the right policies in place, ensuring that those policies are operationalized. These are the things that are important and must never be understated. One of the things reasons I don't overly care for IT companies doing CMMC consulting work is because they have an IT centric approach to this work, right? They're not thinking about the governance approach to this work, and governance is what matters most here. You have to govern the IT function. Okay. The one example that I gave is our CMMC Assured Enclave. That is one approach of how an organization can totally separate their CMMC scope from their existing business, where you're able to access your data within this managed environment, and you don't have to turn your entire company into a CMMC compliant company. There are different approaches to this, but going back to this point, scope drives cost, complexity, and whatever your evidence burden is. All right. So I've talked a lot. There's contact information here on this slide, but you all will receive this slide as well. I wanted to leave as much time as possible for questions. We do have, I believe, 7 poll questions that we're going to walk through one at a time, and hopefully that will serve as, a catalyst for some additional conversations. So, Latonya, I think I am ready for the poll questions.
First poll is launched.
Okay. So I'm going to narrate this. First course, we're going to measure your CMMC awareness. How familiar are you with this program? You heard about it for the first time when you got the invite from the CRMSDC, or you've heard about it but don't really understand the requirements. You understand the basics. You're already working on this. Where are you? All right. So the good news here is that all of you have, by virtue of the fact that you registered for this, but all of you have heard of this. You would be, or maybe not surprised to know, is that very often I come across firms where this is new to them, right? A lot of us have heard, 43% of us have heard about these requirements. I think that is a good thing. I don't think the DoD has done the best job at publicizing this as much. You know, the Defense Department's CIO's website has CMMC information galore. I probably never came across a defense contractor that have gone to the DoD's CUI website. So there's a lot, and that's why programs like this is very, very necessary and very helpful. But we have to get the word out of what this program actually is. All right, next poll.
Second poll question launched.
All right. So what is your exposure to the defense supply chain today? Are you currently pursuing or supporting a DoD related agency? Are you doing it as a prime? Are you doing it as a subcontractor? Are you exploring DoD opportunities? Where are we? So my question to folks who are prime contractors, the question then would be, okay, so about a third of us are primes, is what are you hearing from your contracting officer about this? One of my biggest peeves has been the fact that most firms that we work with are getting zero insights from the contracting officer about CMMC. Okay. As a prime contractor, are you flowing these clauses down? Are you talking to your subcontractors about CMMC, especially if these are critical subcontractors that you intend to continue to work with? If you're thinking about CMMC, they should be thinking about CMMC. If you're a subcontractor, what are you hearing from your prime? Right? What are you hearing from your prime? If you're not hearing anything, you should be proactive. Because usually when that message comes down, it's going to come down, I expect you to be compliant. Tell me when you are compliant, right? So you should be reaching out to your prime contractor to say, hey, what's the plan here? If you're exploring DoD opportunities, one of the things that we're seeing increasingly, if that there are RFIs, there are RFPs, there are sources served that are being put out on the street that already have the CMMC requirements built into them. Right? So being proactive is very necessary. CMMC compliance, which may include an actual certification, it's a condition of award, right? So even if you win, so as part of the evaluation, right, the program office, the contracting officer is looking into the spurs to see, hey, have you made the requisite entries into the spurs for your CMMC compliant? So if you're not there, you're not even in the game, right? But for you to be awarded a contract, you have to be CMMC compliant if that is a requirement of that contract, right? CMMC is a condition of award requirement. All right, what's our next one?
Third question launched.
All right, do you know whether your organization handles FCI or CUI? So I've talked a little bit about what FCI is, a little bit about what CUI is. Do you know? Now, what this does not speak to is a real challenge that has always been an issue, but will increasingly become so. And that challenge is the overclassifying of data as CUI that really should not be classified as CUI, right? But it doesn't matter, right? Because this is a contractual requirement. If the government said that this data is going to be CUI, they make that determination, right? Because this classification is a risk-based determination. The government is saying that, hey, this information, if compromised, right, is going to affect us adversely. So we said 0% say yes, we handle FCI. So I'm surprised because as a defense contractor, we all handle FCI, right? Oh, I should actually, as a federal contractor, we all handle FCI. But we have folks that are handling, CUI today. We have folks that think that they may be handling CUI today. So the question is, where are you from a compliance perspective, right? What does your entry in the spurs say about your compliance status? Okay, and is that an entry that is backed up by verifiable evidence? Right? This is important, right? This is a business eligibility requirement we're talking about. This is not a security requirement at all, right? This is about security, but the government is measuring your eligibility to be awarded contracts, and that's what this is for. All right, number 4.
Fourth question launched.
So where are you most likely to receive or store or access CUI? Most likely, right? For a lot of us, data come at us from every which way, but where are you most likely? Okay. If it's email, is your email CMMC compliant? Right? If it's a shared or cloud storage location, is that cloud storage CMMC compliant? There are specific technical requirements for IT infrastructure, right? If it's different types of data, right? Like technical files, where is that being stored? If we're talking about contract or project documentation, who has access to that, right? So these are all the questions that you sort of have to think through before you determine, hey, what is the scope of our CMMC going to be, right? So most half of us here are likely going to receive CUI via email. So when you're sort of strategizing on your CMMC program, your question then becomes, what is the authorized approach for receiving CUI within our environment? Now, we're not going to talk about the use cases where someone, might be the government, just willy-nilly emails you CUI. We're not going to talk about those. But the question is, what is the plan for you receiving CUI within the organization? If it's in contract, if it's in project documentation, where does that go? Are you downloading that from a portal onto your local device? Are you receiving them via some file share? Is it a paper document? right? These, again, all of this determines the scope of your CMMC program. All right, next.
Fifth question.
How, yeah, so how confident are you that you can scope your assessment today? Because now we're thinking about scope a little bit differently, right? We're not thinking about my company wants to be CMMC compliant. That's not what's happening here, right? CMMC is not certifying your company. It's certifying the information system that is used to process, store, and transmit CUI. And that information system consists of the people, the technology, the facilities, the networks, the systems that are part of this data flow, right? As well as the systems that are used to manage all the things that are within there, right? So as you start to think through what scoping looked at, the question is, are you prepared to scope your CMMC? Because if you're going out and you're talking to a vendor, you need to be able to tell them, this is my scope. This is how we access CUI. These are the number of people. These are the systems. These are the locations, right? Because that drives what your program looks like. And that's have significant impact on what your cost structure looks like. All right. So a third of us are very confident. That is great, right? A third of us are somewhat confident. That is good too. That is good too. That is a start, right? That is a start. Some of us are not sure what would be in the scope. Again, some of this is projecting future, right? Because when you determine your scope, you as an organization, you determine your scope. You said, this is how we're going to manage this, right? CUI is going to reside here. It's going to be processed this way. It's not going to reside there and be processed that way, right? So some of this might take talking through what that scope needs to be with someone who understands how to properly scope and how CMMC actually works, right? But understanding that I need to scope my engagement is sort of the first win, right? I'm not by default being all the way in. Okay. I got a call just this morning. A company left me a voicemail, small defense contractor, husband and wife team, they work from home, right? So the question now becomes, how do we scope CUI for that type of environment? Okay, is it feasible for that home network to be within scope? Is it feasible for the devices that they're working on to be within scope? And all of the management, the monitoring, the security that is required? Or does it make sense to say, hey, how about we de-scope all of this and place you in an enclave where you will be managed and we don't have to worry about what security on your home network with your kids browsing the web and all that happening looks like, right? Scoping is important. All right, next question.
Sixth question launched.
So this is a little bit trickier because now you are strategizing, right? We're saying that, hey, if I'm a company of 20 people and I'm the owner and I'm the only one that needs to access CUI, what approach would I use, right? Or if I'm a company of 100 people and 20 of us need to access CUI, what approach would I use? This is somewhat of an unfair question because all of these choices have implications, right? They have level of effort implications, they have cost implications, and you may not fully know what those are. But just based on what I've shared, what would you be thinking about, hey, how would I want to scope my CUI environment? Mhm. The best calls I have are with companies that come to the table showing that we've already started to think about how we do this, and we are thinking that we could do A and B and C. Sometimes it's like, that's an excellent idea. Other times it'd be like, okay, how about if we adjust this a little bit because that particular solution might not work, or what you are saying works perfectly, but there's an easier way, right? So thinking about how you strategize your CMC environment, I think is very important, especially since this is something that you're going to have to live with, right? When I was deciding CMMC for my company, I need to ensure that, hey, can I work with this, right? Can I actually function with this that I'm putting in place for me and my whole team, et cetera, et cetera. So the type of strategy, there are implications that, I mean, it's best to walk through those implications with folks that have expertise. But let's see what some of your initial thoughts are. All right. So the good news is no one is saying, let's bring their entire company within scope. And that is great, right? We always want to avoid that if we can. Creating a segmented environment, that's always a good option based on feasibility. Again, having a dedicated CUI enclave that is based on feasibility. Not sure is good because not sure is starting from a point of, I know that there are options out there, you know, I just need to figure out the one that works best for my organization, right? And I think that is an important starting point as well. All right, what's our last poll question?
Last
All right,
question launched.
last question launched. What is your biggest concern about CMMC? Is it the cost? Is it the complexity? Is it the lack of internal expertise? Is it audit readiness? Is it understanding whether it even applies to us? There's not all of the above, but we don't want all of them. Look, what do you see as your biggest concern right now with us in the middle of the phase one rollout of the CMMC program, approaching phase two in 5 months, when the government's going to start to require certifications increasingly? Look, what are you most concerned about? Interesting. All right. So we're not overly concerned with cost. We're overly concerned with complexity, audit readiness, and understanding whether it applies to us. So I'm going to start with the understanding whether it applies to us. Okay. How do you know? If you have an existing contract today, that contract has clauses in them. Check to see if you have the DFARS 7012 clause in it. You can just do a control F for 7012, right? If it's there, it applies to you. That's a done deal. Okay. If it's not in your contract, or if you are working on a subcontract, ask your prime. Okay. If you don't have an existing contract today and are prospecting for future contracts, look at existing contracts that are out there right now, right? Even ones that you are not eligible for. Look and see, hey, this is the type of work that I'm going to pursue. Does this require CMMC? Does this require NIST 800-171? Right? Does it require DFARS 712? I mean, understanding whether it applies to us, you can find out. The data is there to tell you either it applies to you today or it's going to apply to you in the near future. Audit readiness is the challenge, right? If you're preparing for an audit, it is a specific workflow to be able to demonstrate to a third party. So doing the things is not enough. You have to be able to do it in a way that is verifiable, right? And that takes some work. The complexity is there. Depending on the nature of your environment. If you do not have a mature IT management program, a lot of what is required here is going to be new to you, because CMMC requires mature IT management. right? And mature IT management requires not just expertise, but also infrastructure to perform that mature IT management. One of the ways that we've been working on sort of tackling this is the fact that, yes, I mean, we work with small businesses and you know, there's a fair percentage of folks out there that do not have the capability to manage a mature IT management and CUI governance program and all of what that entails, right? So the answer to that isn't going to be, I'm going to give you some consulting services or I'm going to give you access to technology. It has to be a model that is going to manage it for them. And that's one of the things that we have been working on, right? Because best intentions aside, this work requires expertise. This work requires availability. This work requires skills. This work requires infrastructure that it would certainly not make sense to expect most of the small businesses in the defense industrial base to go out and start hiring security compliance people, right? Keep in mind, I did not say hiring IT people. This is a different job. There's an IT component to it that any IT person can do, but security governance, security compliance is a different discipline, okay? So yes, the complexity is a challenge, and that's something that we as industry and government is going to have to do better at. All right. So I think that is our last poll question, right?
Correct. That's our last question.
All right. Are there any questions? Did we get any questions in the Q&A?
I'm seeing no questions at the moment unless any of the attendees want to unmute themselves to ask questions.
Now, one of two things just happened. Either I've just bored you all to sleep, is after lunch, or I've just provided such breathtaking information that you all need a minute to sort of digest. What my hope is that this is the first of a three-part series. My hope is that this is part of a continuing conversation across these next 3 months, right? We have one this month, one next month, and the last one in August. The dates were shown earlier. I believe it's July 23rd and August 16. The next session is going to go more in depth into implementing these actual requirements. It's going to be a little bit more technical. And the last session is going to go into preparing for your audit and being ready to demonstrate your compliance. My contact information is on the last slide. This slide is going to be shared with you all. If you have questions that you're not comfortable sort of asking here in this forum, reach out to me. My hope is that this is the beginning of a conversation around what this means for you and your business, and whatever insights that I can share. Zero sales pressure. I'm here for that.
Hi, William. We do have a question from Stephen. For a small business that has no central server, but is segmented in its receipt of possible CUI, are there any special considerations?
So I would need to go into a little more detail about what segmented means, right? But let's speak more broadly. CMMC has a requirement around your physical location, okay? If you have no servers located at your physical location and you do not have a need to print and store CUI locally, right? There is an approach, this goes back to our scoping slide, that you can keep your entire physical facility out of scope, right? Ensuring that you have the requisite technical controls in place. So if you have no physical security, if you have no physical devices or servers, or you have a laptop but no physical servers where the data is being stored, my assumption is that you are using some cloud-based resource. There's a specific requirement for storing CUI in the cloud, right? CUI that is stored in the cloud need to be either FedRAMP authorized, that means they need to be a certified cloud environment, or they have to be able to demonstrate FedRAMP moderate equivalency. That means they may not be fully authorized, but they have gone through an audit and they've been able to demonstrate that, hey, we meet all of the requirements to be able to store federal data in the cloud. Okay, so that means that your system that you are storing CUI in has to meet these security requirements. That is not your default Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 or all of these platforms have versions that can support this. But yes, you need to ensure that your CUI stored in the cloud is on a compliant infrastructure. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Stephen. I'm happy to do a follow-up if you have it.
Okay. Well, William, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
We greatly appreciate it. And for those that stayed with us, we greatly appreciate you also, and understand, as he said, this is the first of three. He will come again on July the 23rd and talk about the NIST SP 800-171, the domain deep dive, and then he'll come back on August the 26th. I'm talking about implementation strategies. And so, I mean, if for those that showed today, clearly, if this continues to interest you, as he said, it's the beginning of a conversation, and we hope to see you in July. Also, next month we'll continue our AI series with Agnes Kilby on July the 16th, and then finish up on August the 20th. Mark your calendars. Our annual golf networking tournament at Woodmore Golf Country Club is on September the 14th. Again, on behalf of our president, Sharon R. Pender, I'm Tommy Marks, the Vice President of Council Engagement at CRMSDC, and we thank you and wish you well for the rest of the day. A rainy day it is, I'm told. I mean, I'm in a room where I don't have windows, but I'm told it's raining. So take care. And as he said, you'll get a copy of these slides along with once our great Phoenix support team finishes with the video. There'll be a link established that you can go back. As I saw in the chat from one attendee, hey, it was great. It's heavy on the brain. So you can go and you have to digest it. We know. And so but you'll be able to go back to the video and hear him talk about it as many times as you want. Okay. And that'll be provided to you over the next 72 hours. So again, thanks very much. And William, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.